Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Stoppage Time. We are in three different time zones. I think if Harrison is in Georgia or Alabama, I do not know. But welcome back. It's Chris from Alaska. How you doing, Chris?
Howdy. It is a great day to do a podcast. I'll start it off with that, but glad to be here.
Could have caught you in a better mood. Harrison, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Taking it how it is.
All right, where are you now?
I'm in Georgia right now.
Okay,
I'm,
so
a little south of Atlanta.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we're after graduating college, we're all in three different places, and we're doing this all over the Zoom, and at the same time, we feel like we're still in college. But so the Premier League is back. We're not 10 weeks into the season. There's been a lot that's happened. There's been manager changes. There's been different players bought by squads. There's this dude named Holland who exists on Manchester City and has already seemed to score more goals than 90% of the league did last year. But we're going to start with the most important game of the weekend and usually every season, Liverpool, Manchester City. And Liverpool won, surprisingly, 1-0 with Mohamed Salah scoring a pretty awesome goal, to be honest with you. Chris, we obviously will start with you because you are the Liverpool fan. How are you feeling?
Yeah. You're going to be hard pressed to be able to wipe this smile off my face for the entire week. I'll be able to carry this with me. Forget about Auburn. It's all about Liverpool right now. But just what a wonderful game. There's usually two ways that these games have gone over the last 5 or so years, and that's either these big like 2-2 or 3-1 games, or it's a 0-0 draw. And we were very much looking at a 0-0 draw, but I think City lost the game the second they walked out on the pitch with those horrible highlighter jerseys. Those were just awful. But like Liverpool, no one expected Liverpool to show up in this game. I mean, out of the 5 of us in our little fantasy group, 4 of us had Holland captain, and the exception, Andy, had Kevin De Bruyne captain. So I think it's fair to say that, everyone thought pretty confidently, considering how well City have started out the season. Holland has 15 goals so far. Kevin De Bruyne, Phil Foden, Bernardo Silva racking up the goal involvements, and they've been one of the best teams on defense too. They have, I think, maybe the second or third lowest XG against right now, along with Arsenal and I think actually Brighton. Whereas Liverpool just have, they've looked completely rattled this entire year, and especially with some of the injuries that we were looking at going into this game. Kanate being out on short notice, Joel Matip being out on short notice, Trent potentially being out and then coming back as a substitute, and he put in about 10 minutes in that game. But I think what a lot of people looked at the team sheet and they saw Gomez playing center back and James Milner playing at right back. A lot of people, including myself, thought that it was going to be a tough 90 minutes watching James Milner have to go up against Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva, and having to watch Joe Gomez going up against Erling Haaland. But it was an incredible showing, some incredible spirit on the pitch. And I think what we saw in this game is a Liverpool that played with a lot more confidence. And what I mean by confidence, because a lot of people just throw out, oh, they look very confident on the pitch. What I mean by that is, especially with the pressing, it looked very deliberate compared to the previous 10 games earlier this season. And I think this team is finally kind of growing into this new 4-4-2 shape. Liverpool, of course, changed into the 4-4-2 shape ahead of after the 3-3 against Brighton, ahead of the first game against Rangers. And I was trying to provide more defensive cover because teams kept exploiting the space between the fullbacks and kept going on the counterattack. And we even saw that against Arsenal last week. The first 2 goals that Arsenal scored were both on the counter, using the space behind Tsimikas and kind of playing through Liverpool without Liverpool being able to kind of compress and retain their shape. And something that we saw today was that the shape of the back was phenomenal. And Liverpool, yeah, there were a lot of chances that City created, but at the end of the day, the XG was like Liverpool 2, City 1. So Liverpool were conceding a good number of chances. City had more shots. I think they had about 15, but they weren't from good areas mostly. They were, mainly kept outside the box. And that was something that, I got to give credit to Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk for shutting down Holland the way that they did. And I think that one of probably the biggest takeaway from this game is that people have been saying, "Oh, Liverpool, they need they need a spark," as some people have said, and we've seen a lot of false starts to this season. Right? It was Liverpool have the 3-1 win at the Community Shield against City, and then draws against Fulham, draw against Palace, loss against United, and then you have the 9-0 win against Bournemouth, and people think, "Oh, Liverpool are back," and then it was a very tight 2-1 win over Newcastle. Then a draw against Everton, then a loss against Napoli. There's a win against Ajax, but then there's the draw against Brighton, and you play Rangers in there. But it was really like that 7-1 game that happened during midweek. I think that helped bring some confidence, especially into this new system, just giving them time on the pitch to be able to adapt to that. Because I mean, it was a tough game against Arsenal last week, sure, but Liverpool didn't do enough to win that game. But they certainly did enough to win this game. And if this is the spark people are talking about, I think this performance is it, and they passed that test with flying colors.
Harrison, I have an interesting question for you because I know you're big into tacticians and stuff, and I know that Did Trent Alexander-Arnold not playing today help Liverpool win?
I think the team largely adopted just a fight in them. They showed a level of solidity that they haven't had at mostly at all this season, and I think not having Jordan Henderson in the team while also having James Milner out there. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, as long as both of them aren't out there, I think that's for the best. But look, I just think Liverpool played really solid today. And I think that was what they had to do. They played at Anfield, and Anfield that was just electrified. And I mean, it's a great result. I don't think it's possible for them to build off much. I mean, I think the midfield is just largely too unathletic to make a run of results happen. I mean, I just have been so unimpressed with the way they're caught in transition all year. It's really difficult to imagine a way that they fight for a title with Arsenal and Manchester City. I mean, even with this result, it's just it's crazy to see the odds for them still seeing odds float around for Premier League titles from places like 538 that are very accurate with title predictions and widely used for political scales and things of that nature.
I mean, the reason I asked about Trent is because when watching the game, and I am a Trent fan. I do like Trent. I think he's an outstanding player, but against a team that we know is the attacking, what people consider like the attacking perfection. You want to be like City. You want to be, I mean, Liverpool too, but City's like, you have Erling Haaland, Phil Foden, Ilkay Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, all of these great, Bernardo Silva. I thought Liverpool did a very, very good job today. Other than really, Haaland had a header at one point that I think he would love to have back, because I think 8 out of 10 times he scores there every time. It was right at Alisson, but otherwise,
if we're talking about Liverpool having held Haaland to one chance that he wants back, that means they did a pretty job.
Oh yeah, and that's what I thought. I thought defensive. I thought this was Van Dijk's best game I've seen him play all season, and I was just really impressed. And I think obviously being at Anfield made a difference as it.
Oh, big time. Yeah, no, this was the most electric crowd that I've seen at Anfield, certainly all season. And that just lifts the spirits. Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna talk about Trent a little bit, I think the thing that you really got to focus on this game is not Trent didn't play and James Milner didn't play. It was really about the shape of the team, right? And ever since Liverpool transitioned into the 4-4-2, we saw it in the first game against Rangers. Kostas Tsimikas on the left was able to push up a lot further, and Trent was staying back a lot more and almost in line with the two center backs. And I think what that allows Trent to do is it gives him more space because he's further back, and he can really push up into that space more. Because instead of thinking like in the 4-3-3, the thought is Trent has to push up so that he can make a triangle with whoever the center midfielder is on the right, usually Jordan Henderson. between Trent, Jordan Henderson, and Salah in order to kind of move that. But we haven't really been seeing, stability in the midfield, of course, and Jordan Henderson has just not been at previous levels this season. And so the change of shape pushes Trent back and allows him kind of more space to go for more of those longer balls. And that's what we saw in the first goal at Arsenal. Trent plays a long ball against to Luis Diaz, who's making a crossing route, and then he's able to put it in for Nunez. So they're really focusing on that instead of, pushing him so far up in the space that he has to then sprint all the way back and then try and make a challenge. So I think if Trent had been playing, he would have been playing in a similar style to Milner. So I think it's more about the shape and not as much about the personnel. But we'll see if he plays against West Ham this week. I mean, yeah. As we were also saying, like Liverpool are out of the title race. Like there's no debate there. Currently, they're on 13 points, 8th place, and 14 off City. Liverpool do have a game in hand, but at this point, unless something drastic with the World Cup happens and Liverpool get Jude Bellingham and 3 other midfielders in the transfer window, like it's just not happening. But I think the hope is for Liverpool is that they'll be able to put together a string of games in these next few games, because they do go up against, pretty, I think, beatable opponents for Liverpool. It's West Ham, Nottingham Forest, and then Leeds with 2 Champions League fixtures in there before having to play Tottenham. So I think if Liverpool can get 9 points from those 3 games, we can start talking about top 4.
So I'm not going to talk about the title race yet until a little bit later in the show, just because I want to talk about Arsenal before we talk about that. But for City every season loses 1 or 2 games, kind of like they lost twice to Tottenham last year and Crystal Palace. Is this a worrying result, or is this just kind of par for the course and need to move on? Either one of you guys can answer that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I think, no, this shouldn't really be a worrying result for City. They always have this. I mean, this was going to be their toughest game the entire year. Looking at it from the start of the season, it might be, against Arsenal at the Emirates later this year, just based on how Arsenal's form is. But, City were able to beat Liverpool at Anfield during the 2020-2021 season when there were not fans there. And last year they went and drew 2-2 because of a late De Bruyne strike, and they lost today. So I think it's really just down to the fans that they were able to, kind of make City stumble. But no, considering how good their form has been, and if you look at the underlying numbers, today was just a blip in their season, and they're going to be able to steamroll over everyone else who comes in their path, apart from, maybe Spurs, Arsenal, another Liverpool game. We'll see about that.
Harrison, how good, since Erling Haaland, and we haven't done a show since Erling Haaland has signed for Manchester City, how good is he?
He's absolutely excellent for a guy who's really uninvolved in build-up largely. With a team as complex as City, it is incredible how few touches he can have in the first 3 quarters of the field, but then he gets back into that last quarter and he's right there and making the touch, finishing in whatever way. I mean, whether it's getting his leg 6 feet in the air against Dortmund or whatever it is. I mean, the guy is just going to score. I think Grealish is really taken to Haaland because a lot of that gravity comes towards Grealish, and Haaland is such an excellent finisher that it just takes one opportunity, just the slightest opportunity, and he'll get a goal.
Does he score above 35 goals this season?
I would say I wouldn't bet against it. I mean, I really have no idea because I do worry about his injury record. I will wonder what's going to happen. I do think it's a huge benefit to Pep that the Norway is not in the World Cup, and Holland can take some real time to relax before an even busier part of the season will come flying back right in front of us in December. So I just would keep that in mind. He did have adductor and hamstring issues at Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean, he's an incredible player. I've honestly never seen anyone like him. before.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Ibrahimovic didn't have the sheer speed that he has. I mean, there was power and there was technique, but you had this speed. And at this age, Ibrahimovic wasn't exactly showing the maturity either. This is a different type of gravy.
Yeah, and I mean, going from one striker who has gone running into the Premier League, and then you look at Nunez for Liverpool, and he had a few chances today. And they still won, but he had a few chances today that I think showed his age and lack of maturity into the Premier League.
Yeah. So I think really the thing that we got to focus on with the comparison between Nunez and Haaland.
That's the thing. Don't do it.
Yeah. That's exactly the thing. That's the point. Thank you, Harrison. Yeah. We right now what we're doing is we're comparing, possibly the next Ronaldo or the next Messi to this one guy who had a really good season in the Portuguese league, and we're now trying to build into the Premier League. Because if you look at his goals per minutes, goal involvements per however many minutes he's played in, Nunez has a solid number right there. But I think Nunez, I think, might be maybe a year older than Haaland, but he just doesn't have the same type of experience that Haaland has at playing at the high level for as many years as he has. Because even when Haaland was at Salzburg, he was playing in the Champions League, and that was in 2019. So he's been at that level for 3 years, whereas Nunez had 1 year in the Portuguese league, pretty much at that level. So I think this is just going to, be a thing that, you got to take a lot of time to compare those two players. And they're also completely different players. Like Nunez has shown that he's, he's not going to be the super build up player, but he's going to be more involved in that. And with Nunez, right, he's just, it's just mainly, he's going to take a little bit of time. He's just not he hasn't honed his craft the way that Haaland has. Haaland has perfected it.
There's some between the ears work for Nunez at times. I mean, there are just sometimes when you're watching him and he makes a run and you're just like, where were you going with that? Because I don't even think you knew where you were going with that. But I like him because I know he's going to move well and he's going to find chances. It's just slowing. The game will slow down. It's a little too quick for him right now.
I think the unlucky thing for Nunez is the price tag, and I'm not saying that's not me saying Liverpool overpaid or anything. It's that Haaland's price tag, he had a buyout clause, and it doesn't help that one of the greatest prospects to ever exist went for 50 odd million, and then Nunez, who is a number 9, which we see in the world of football right now, there are not as many pure number 9s as there have been in the past. So they're going to go at a premium, and that's what he went for when he played for Benfica. So I think he's unlucky, and I also agree with Harrison. I also like him. I think he just needs to he needs time. I mean, how many times do you really see a player come into the Premier League and right off the bat and do what Haaland's doing? You don't see that.
Yeah, you don't see that every day, especially with this Liverpool team. Yeah,
that Anthony guy.
He's all right. Let's talk about that Anthony guy.
I want to finish on one more thing about Nunez. I think the important thing is if we're going to compare price points, you got to look at how much City are going to pay this kid every week compared to Nunez. In the long run, City are going to pay out way more than Liverpool are for Nunez. And the net spend over the last 4 years for City compared to Liverpool is, I think City are at about 480 million, whereas Liverpool are about 180 million. So, we can talk about which team has the better spending habits. But
if you wanted a player right now, both of you, Mbappe or Haaland, who would you take?
Oh, Haaland. All day.
I would take Mbappe. I can't lie. I'm not turned off by the attitude issues because I actually don't believe a lot of them are true. And I still think he's got a more complete game, but that's just me. I also did anybody hear Pep at the end of the game in the locker room? He said after the mistake, and he said, "This is Anfield." Oh, beautiful.
Oh man, he is. Pep at Anfield is a meme content machine. How many times has Pep lost to Liverpool this season? So I mean, that's
absolutely.
All right. I prefer not to speak.
Let's talk about let's talk about the other title contender. Let's talk
Yeah.
about Arsenal, because last time we did the podcast, I believe Arsenal was an 8th, like, and not really going above 8th. Like, that's where they were. The turnaround that has happened over the last year with that team has been insane. What Arteta has done has been incredible. I mean, you don't see a team just totally rally. The players he buys come in and they do, Gabriel Jesus. And I know how good he was for City, but he makes that Arsenal team click. And Saliba is, everyone kind of said people said like he was the Mbappe of center backs. That's what people called him. And he's really is an outstanding. I mean, he's not, Mbappe, don't get me wrong, but he is an outstanding player. And they're in first by 4 points. They're flying. Their only loss this year is to Manchester United. The game today, however, was not the greatest Arsenal performance in the world. I don't know, but they still won. I guess that's what title contenders do. So, Harrison, what has Arteta done to get this team into 4 points above arguably one of the greatest teams to ever exist?
Well, I think it starts with the mentality change. I mean, I absolutely think he instilled a want and a desire in these players that wasn't there before. Whether it was Arsene Wenger's late times there where they were just kind of a lull, and Unai Emery struggling to get the grips with them as well. Arteta has really come in. He's made the team his own. He's gotten rid of the players he's needed to, and he's had plenty of time to bring in the players that he wants. The additions of Zinchenko and Saliba and Gabriel Jesus obviously are huge, but think about the two guys up front in the spearhead with that attack. Saka is the reason they won today. I mean, that finish is beautiful. It's brilliant. It's high and hard and doesn't give the keeper any time to get to it. And Gabriel Martinelli has absolutely come back to show that he is still an excellent player. He tore his ACL. That is a brutal injury to have to go through, especially at a young age when you haven't exactly established yourself. And I mean, they've just come a really long way. And I think Martin Odegaard is just a beautiful footballer. I mean, the guy is he's with Pedri. Like, he's just silky every time you watch him. Every movement is deliberate. Everything he's doing is clever. He's constantly scanning the field, just looking left, right, and center for everyone. I mean, he has a full picture, and he's 3 steps ahead of you before you even know what you want to do.
It is like amazing how, and I was not, I mean, if you go back and listen to the pod from 2 years ago, I was not an Arteta believer. I admit I was wrong. I still do question, like, as great of a start they've had, I still do question how long they will continue to do that. They aren't Manchester City. They haven't spent billions on these superstars. But Chris, is this a title contending team? Can they win the title?
For sure. Yeah. I think so. Listen, today was the kind of game that champions win, right? It was not their best performance. Leeds XG was 2.02, Arsenal's was 0.82, and Arsenal came out with 1 goal and a clean sheet, right? This is completely the game that champions win for. And I think it's because, if anyone here has watched the Arsenal All or Nothing, it's because they have a lot of passion. That's the thing, right? A lot of passion in there, brain and heart together holding hands. No, like All or Nothing was an incredible insight into what's happening back there with his team. And I think the biggest thing, which Harrison talked about, was getting the players that he didn't want out and getting the ones that he did in. And a big part of that was Aubameyang, right? There were a lot of questions when he got out of Aubameyang because of how many goals he had contributed to the team and his efforts, especially in winning the FA Cup. There were a lot of questions about, why are you getting rid of your worst players? It shows that, the manager doesn't have control of the dressing room and yada, yada, yada. No, he had complete control, and he wanted him out because he was causing a fuss and thinking that he was bigger than the team, and no player is bigger than the team. So yeah, he was able to get those guys out. And then something that I kept talking about with Arsenal was, they had quality and youth. They just needed to get that youth on the pitch long enough to build up a repertoire of experience, right? They needed time to build that up and to fully develop into a full team. And we're seeing the fruits of their labor this season. And especially with, I think it was a master stroke with Arteta going back to his old team City and saying, hey, I'm going to take these two players that are kind of more so on the fringes, right? Gabriel Jesus last year was supposed to be his big season at City with Aguero leaving the season before. Now he's the number 9. And Pep was playing Kevin De Bruyne as a false 9. That's how far Gabriel Jesus was from starting in that team. And Zinchenko was on the fringes really with, Cancelo and then even Kyle Walker coming in. And then they had Ake too, who I guess can play fullback. So I guess City didn't really have as much of a need for them, and City seemed to be doing fine without those two players. But I think there got to be a few questions about, them selling two really good players to a team that is now ahead of them by I think 4 points in the Premier League standings. Yeah. So there's got to be a few questions there. But listen, Arsenal have just fully developed into a great team. I think something that I always bring up during Liverpool seasons are they're going to have a good season if they're going to be able to play the same starting 11 every single week. That's what happened in the 18-19 season, and it's what happened in the 19-20 season. And Arsenal certainly don't have the same type of depth that City have. So I think it's going to be a real test to see if their players can stay fit throughout the entire season, but they have the week off this week. They have the midweek off. So, they don't. They play in the Europa League, but, that'll at least give them some ability to shift through some of their players. But I think it's going to come down to, are they going to be able to stay fit for the full season?
I think it's going to come down to who's got the better backup goalkeeper. And these days we know where that's at. All right. Matt Turner is holding that down.
Well, let's talk about Americans for a minute. Let's talk about Leeds. Jesse Marsch is now the manager of Leeds United. They have plenty of our young stars on their team. And I just got to say, I was impressed with Leeds today. I know they lost, but I was still impressed with them. They played really well. I think they probably should have at least drawn. As we were talking about, Arsenal did get the win. That's all that matters. But Jesse Marsch has come in and, kept Leeds up last season and brought in a lot of players that, he wanted and has played really well. And Harrison, with the World Cup coming up, we have more Americans, it seems like, now playing in the Premier League than we've had ever. Is this is Eriksen, and he has to play, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of the Americans in the Premier League, well, first of all, Matt Turner has to start in goal. Christian Pulisic doesn't belong at Chelsea anymore. I think we've all come to terms with that. They don't want him. He doesn't want them. He scored a goal against Wolves and has 0 of 120 possible minutes after that. So, it's just clear this needs to stop. Chris Richards, he's got to find consistency. He has to find consistency at Palace because guess what? Aaron Long is potentially going to start at center back for the United States, and that is a disaster. So I like the Americans all across Europe right now. Honestly, I think there are a few in bad situations. I think Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic are in rough spots, though. I know Eriksen and Adams aren't winning. They are winless in 5 leads, but they're playing. All right. And that's huge. And McKennie is playing, but he does not look anything like the man that I went and saw in Cincinnati about a year ago. This is a guy who's struggling. And honestly, I can't blame him. That Juventus team makes my head hurt.
I think it makes a lot of people's heads hurt. You look at Juventus fans on social media, and they're a mess right now. They're an 8th. They're an 8th. And we're talking about a team that won the title 7 years in a row. And they were only stopped by Antonio Conte's Inter, and they have just fallen apart since then. They don't even have the same players. You look at their starting 11, and it's not even you're like, how is this a superstar team? It's not.
Stadium's half empty and the fans are in a bad way. It's not a good time. But
Yeah.
back to the Americans in the Premier League. I like all the moves that everybody has made from this past summer. And I think that Yunus Musa is arguably the most important player going into this tournament. I know we're very weak at goalkeeper and everyone is very focused on that. But at the end of the day, Matt Turner is not going to be looking to play a 30-yard pass for a transition. Like, that's just not going to happen. And he's going to make saves. And that's what we need.
It's really interesting that we have a World Cup. This is unprecedented. We have a World Cup in November. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that one, the players have been playing a season, so they're coming right from going into season mode into World Cup mode. And on top of that, how that affects the Premier League and the other leagues around the world, because some teams have the whole team's international players and they're going to be playing the World Cup. And there's other teams that, they're going to take the time to build and work and get through that. We're in the World Cup. We made the World Cup. I think we're all very excited for it. We're also probably dreading it just a little bit. And it's just going to be weird seeing that in November.
Speaking of the World Cup and moving along a little bit towards Tottenham, does it worry you that Kane is basically going to shoulder so much of the weight of England and you guys still have 2/3 of a season to go after this?
Yeah. Let's talk about Tottenham. Tottenham beat Everton 2-0, dominated the game. My worry to go along with that is Richarlison's injury. Because for the first time, I think in years, and we have a backup to Kane and Richarlison. But with his injury and Kane going to the World Cup, Kane plays every minute. I think he's our second or third most minutes in competitions this season, behind our goalie and Eric Dyer, behind Lloris and Eric Dyer. And it does worry me because I know we've talked about this before. His injury record is poor.
Those glass ankles.
Well, what I will say to that is, over the last 2 seasons, it's been much better. However, that doesn't mean that at any moment we have seen players just, things happen. It does worry me. Obviously Gareth Southgate in England has been dreadful. There's a lot of hope on England, and a lot of that hope is carried on the captain's shoulders. Harry Kane is in partly the form of his life right now. He is off to the best start he's ever had. We talk about Erling Haaland having 15 goals. Harry Kane has 9 Premier League goals. And that's in 10 games. That's impressive. That's a great start. But yeah, I am concerned, we lose him without Richarlison, we're in trouble. We rely so much on Kane and Son. Not as much as we used to. However, it's still a ridiculous amount. They're still the majority of our goals. And 2 of our forwards are injured right now. And, luckily our best 2 are still available, but that's not, that's not a good feeling.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of things right here. First, if we're talking about Harry Kane and perhaps the England job, I think a name that is going to keep crumping up over this next month as Gareth Southgate makes his final selection going forward, especially, it's got to be Ivan Toney. He is making a real campaign to slot into that England team. So far this season, he has 8 goals in the Premier League. People were questioning, he had a great year with Brentford last year. Is he going to be able to maintain that this year? And so far, he's really showing that he's able to do that. And if we're going to talk about England in, World Cup, Euro competition,
we got to pop the bubble now. Calvert-Lewin was in excellent form, and Gareth Southgate brought him around like a show pony. That was despicable. Yeah, they did very well at the Euros, but come on. He didn't even want to give him a look because the profile of the squad has to stay the way it is. I would love it to see Ivan Toney get not only capped, but capped for like 65, 70 minutes. But I really just can't even imagine that. Not even against Iran or Wales or whatever they've got going on. for the
The
rest
United States. That's the other.
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
the other
look-
team.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not. It would be nice
Whatever
to
they
see
got.
Ivan
Yeah.
Toney play. It really would, but I can't imagine.
Yeah, well,
Good.
he'd be great on penalties. That's the big thing. If we're going to talk about England and their penalties, he scored what 23 out of his last 24, or in the Premier League
Exactly.
period.
Right.
Just in absolutely insane ratio right there. But the other thing for Spurs, at least, that I wanted to talk about, which is, this is very important to me, and I hope that we get to speak a little bit on this later on in the show. But Perisic is in my fantasy team, and I really needed him to play this week, and he did, and he got the clean sheet. And I thought this game against Everton, yeah, I think Tottenham probably could have scored maybe a goal or two more, but I thought this was the first real game where Perisic and Son both looked good when they were both on the pitch.
You must
yeah.
watch the same stuff and read the same stuff I do, because that has been something that has been talked about. You're talking about two of the best. This is two of the best players in their specific positions in the world. Perisic as an attacking fullback, I mean, was the leader in goal contributions last year in Serie A. And Son obviously won the Golden Boot tied with Salah last year. And they haven't been able to somehow, it hasn't meshed at all. And you're 100% right. They have finally, it seems like they're finally starting to figure that out.
But the big problem that they faced is that it just seems like they're trying to play in the same space, and they're not as much focused on link up as they are. Like Perisic is focused on playing the ball into the box to try and get a Harry Kane header, or all the way to the other side if Richarlison's playing on the right, or Kulusevski's on the right, or something like that, and not as much interplay between the two of them. But I thought this was a great game. Like, that's especially one of the criticisms with Son up until the Leicester game. He hadn't scored, correct?
No.
He
Nope.
didn't score at all until that hat trick. Which I also had him in my fantasy team for that on the free hit. But I captained Kane though that week. But yeah, I think that's going to be one of the really important things going forward. And with Tottenham especially, we're seeing all of this rotation in their team. So it's not going to be a dynamic that we see every week, but every other game, every one game out of three, Conte is kind of forced to play two of his best players. It hurts to say when you're forced to play two of your best players and they don't play together well. But
I'm hoping Kulusevski comes back, but it's also to add on to the Perisic talk. I think something that's really important is the fact that Matt Doherty played at right wing back, because when it's Emerson Royale, and I think he has improved a lot. However, he is still not that. He's not good. Like, he's, no matter, like, he's improved, but he's still not good. Like, it doesn't matter, you know. And I think having the right side of the field, if Kulusevski is not on it, has no creativity at all. None. And if you're always forcing things down the left side with Perisic and stuff, the defensive tactics of the other manager, they're going to sit there and look at this and go, dude, you can let the dude on the right go as far up the field as he wants. He can't cross a ball in on target. He can't do successful dribbles. He's fine defensively, but he can't do the attacking stuff that a Conte team must have, especially with the two in the midfield. And those two in the midfield are, don't get me wrong, they're outstanding players, both of them, but neither of them have they don't have the ability to play a Kevin De Bruyne ball like you'd want, that you need them to, when you have the only attacking creative player you have on the whole team is Harry Kane. It doesn't work. So I think Perisic playing on the left with Matt Doherty, who for years played wing back at Wolves, had great numbers at Wolves. Is he my choice to play right wing back long term? No. However, I think that also helped. Emerson Royale, the red card against Arsenal probably allowed Conte, well, made Conte play other players there, and now he's kind of forced into playing the future, like he's Matt Doherty. I mean, I fully expect us to buy another right wing back in the summer, like fully expect us to.
David, what do you make of the comments that Conte said a couple of weeks ago about like something along the lines of like, I'm not a fool, when we play Doherty we lose, something like that?
So to those comments, the Doherty comments were taken out of context.
Okay.
The Spence comments, I love Jed Spence. He is perfect. I mean, he's the best option we have at right wing back. But
show me a 19-year-old Conte played in the last 10 years.
Oh, no. That's the thing, Harrison. You're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. I mean, the fact that Antonio Conte loves Ryan Sessegnon is crazy to me. Loves him. Like he talks so highly of him. I wish Sessegnon was a righty because I mean, it's just the Perisic Son thing. I'm hoping works out more now that we can tack down the right. Spurs are reliant on Kane and Son. Kulusevski is so important to the team for the creativity. I'm hoping he's able to come back and soon. He should be back soon. But yeah, Emerson Royale is wonderful for the locker room and seems like a really nice guy. But dude, it's amazing how Tottenham's right backs have gotten worse and worse and worse every year since we sold Kyle Walker to Manchester City. We went from Kyle Walker to Trippier, and at the time, offensively, Trippier's fine. Defensively for Spurs, he was a nightmare. And then we went from Trippier, we were all like, oh, we got to move on, and we got Serge Aurier. And, everyone was like, oh, Serge Aurier, and he was terrible, Mm-hmm. And then we went from Serge Aurier to Doherty, and then to Emerson Royale, and it's just kind of gone downhill. I'm hoping that now that we have we have Spence, hopefully Doherty just kind of takes over. It'll be good for the future.
Welcome to the story of Manchester United for I don't know, since I've been watching. What was it? Valencia, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Darmian. Right now I got Dallo working around there. It's just been miserable. But I feel that when the right side of the field just doesn't get anything going, you're so reliant on that one side, and players, and they expect it and they know what you're doing, and you get caught out easier. It's really frustrating.
Speaking of Manchester United, so Manchester United drew Newcastle 0-0. Two teams that have gone through wild changes since last time we all talked about them in person. So let's start with Manchester United. Probably should have won today. Missed some chances. However, this is a period right now. Erik ten Hag is now the head coach. This is a period of change, new tactics, moving out the old, bringing in the new. Brought some really great young prospect players, but still have this old guy named Ronaldo, and who I know makes Harrison pull his hair out.
It's great for the dressing room. Great.
Just a wonderful personality. Really brings out the team's spirit.
Yeah, it really brings out camaraderie. That's what he's.
Yes. Lots of warmth, all of that.
Warmth. So Harrison, so far Ten Hag has. You guys haven't struggled the first few games.
Oh yeah,
first two, and then played Liverpool. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your take on Ten Hag so far?
I love him. The guy's taking charge. He's stern in his approach. He's smart. He's very well adapted to the tactics so far of English football. And honestly, this is just a season you have to get through. This is one of these where there's a ceiling on this team because of Ronaldo. It is just as simple as that. Like I know I sound crazy because you guys hear me say it every weekend, but like today for 72 minutes, I mean, build-up is screwed up because he's so desperate to score. He's 25 yards too deep, touching the ball for no reason. And whereas Martial would be right in position, or whether we played Sancho or Rashford or Antony. So the point is that Manchester United has a hard ceiling with Cristiano Ronaldo, and let's separate everything else from that. I like a little bit of what Anthony's had. I think I've expected more because we did pay the premium. We always pay the premium, but he's very left-footed. I knew that going into it, but yeah, I mean, he barely uses his right foot. Casemiro's adapting well. Today he was really nice. Today we retained possession very well because of Casemiro and Fred chasing the ball down. However, we did miss a former Spurs player, Christian Eriksen. He is my favorite player of the season. I absolutely love midfielders of that ilk. He's so technically gifted. He is, like I said earlier about Odegaard, he is scanning the field repeatedly too. It's just so impressive, the picture he has in his head. I like this Manchester United team as a whole. There's just a couple of flaws. I don't know what it's going to take to get Jadon Sancho to look like Jadon Sancho in Germany. I'm still not out on him or anything like that. I just wonder what we have to do to bring that guy out, because we don't have the right back that he had at Dortmund and Hakimi, who was overlapping and was also just like, rapidly fast and had a wicked right foot. But yeah, he's got to find a relationship with a fullback to be the player that he was. And we will absolutely welcome that when he can be that guy for us again. But I like Ten Hag, and I like all the players he's brought in.
What's your ceiling this season? Like what do you
I'd probably fourth is as high as it would go, but I mean, that's even a shot. I'd say we'd probably go to the Europa League again, if I'm honest, because if Ronaldo doesn't leave in January, there will be more games where he's just kind of holding the team back. I mean, it is crazy. It is absolutely crazy, because I see guys with 50,000 followers who hop on Twitter and go like, oh, well, if Ronaldo had the Fred or Rashford chance. Those chances came about because we moved the ball quickly, and we just don't move the ball quickly with him on the field. So we can play that game all day long. Oh, if he was on the field for this, no, I don't know. We don't make a lot of these chances with him on the field. So yeah, I mean, there's a limit to how many games they can win because they have to play him. He's on too much money, and he'll make too much of a fuss if he doesn't.
Yeah, and then
On that one, on what you were saying, Harrison. United are making those chances when Ronaldo is not on the pitch. United's best two chances of the day today came with Fred in the 87th minute and Rashford in the 94th minute. And without those two chances, United's XG falls from 1.42 to 0.45. So 0.45 is the XG when you got Ronaldo on the pitch. So yeah, United are just not nearly as dangerous with him. And he scored a bunch of goals last year, and he showed up. But we were saying last year, right? He's helping the team in these moments, but he's not going to be the one that you want to build a team around at this point, especially.
I genuinely believe, and I think Harrison will disagree with this, but I genuinely believe that last year, Ronaldo, I'm not going to say he helped United, but with the coaching, which everything that happened, like all the mess that Ole to Ragnick and all that mess, right? His goals helped United. But this year, that's not possible.
Yeah, you're right. That's absolutely spot on. You're 100% right, because what happened last year was there was no tactical plan. And when you are as good as Cristiano Ronaldo, you can make goals from nothing when a team has no plan, because they will just hone in on you. And our players did. I mean, I watched so many guys just defer to Ronaldo throughout last season. And yeah, he did score goals because of that. I mean, look at the Tottenham game. I mean, that was absurd. That was absurd. No one thought that would happen, but it did, because that's what he does. He can do that on a day. But yeah, now you're right. There's a tactical plan, and there are jobs that he has to do that he doesn't feel are necessary. He thinks, I mean, I heard his agent's lip piece, Duncan Castles, talking about how Ronaldo thinks the tactics are stubborn, and Erik ten Hag is a little bit annoying with that. I mean, you're old, man. Like, that's just how it is. You can't move the way you did. You didn't even when they wanted you to. Ferguson had to adapt his whole tactical plan to cope with the fact that Ronaldo wasn't going to press or track back as much. And
that's crazy with a young player. That's crazy with a young player, and he had to adapt to that,
Exactly. I mean, but it is what it is with these guys. Like, you will adapt with Mbappe. He is not going to track back, but you do that for the special. But it's that little bit of the special has dwindled. He's 30.
And when you find the special that is willing to adapt to you, then you see a system like
Kevin
I
De
mean,
Bruyne and Mohamed Salah and
Yeah.
players like that. I mean, like Harry Kane. I mean, there are guys like that. But
no,
there's-
yeah, but I mean, like Ronaldo, we're talking about one of the best players to ever play the game. Like this is not
Yeah.
like there's a
Yeah.
difference between greatness and one of the best ever. Ronaldo is one of the best ever, and I totally agree with you. This season, Ten Hag's success at Ajax came to the fact that they played his system to perfection. The Champions League run that they had, where they lost the Spurs, was an unbelievable success, and they should have gone to the final. And because of the way they played, they didn't have these unbelievably. I mean, yeah, Frankie De Jong was on the team, and Hakim Ziyech and De Ligt, and but those were the three main players in that team. That Ziyech has not adapted to the Premier League. Frankie De Jong's an unbelievable player, and De Ligt has done very well in Syria. Well, did somewhat well in Syria. Is doing okay in the Bundesliga. I know he's been injured. But Ten Hag's success comes from everyone buying into what he wants to do. And then you see kind of like Arteta, you see a progression over time to everyone buying in. And then a team such as Arsenal this year have played lights out, except for a little blip, it's nice seeing United have that, though. They haven't had it in years.
I do. I want to give a quick shout out to Spurs, though, for winning that second leg against Ajax, because if Ajax had gone through in the 2019 Champions League, Liverpool would have had to wear purple in the final. So a little shout out to Spurs. But I think another thing to focus on with United is one of the big talking points after the second game of the season. So before they beat Liverpool and kind of, the talking point shifted, one of the big talking points was, Ten Hag has a choice right now. He can either play to his system and maybe not get all the results, but start that development process, or he can play to the players that he has right now, and maybe Ronaldo will score a few more goals, but it's not going to be that step in the right direction. And he said, no, I'm going to stick with this system. We're going to build with it. We're going to develop that. And I think that's what, winning coaches need to do, build on the players that you have over the next transfer windows over the next few years, but at least start that process so that when you get those pieces and start filling it in, it's going to be a lot easier for them to slot in, because you already have all the pieces are in place. You just got to fit them in.
Let's talk about another coach who builds on the team they have. We were talking about a little bit before the pod, Eddie Howe at Newcastle. Newcastle is a totally different team than it was 2 years ago. Totally different. This is a when at St. James' part, they can beat anybody, in my opinion. New ownership, lots of money, but has not spent lots of money, like in a way that everyone thought, oh, they're going to come in, they're going to spend 500 million. That didn't happen. They have bought smartly. They have bought, players who are going to fit a system that Eddie Howe wants to play. I know they spent 70 million in Alexander Isaac, for example, but they're not buying these. They were linked with Neymar. They were linked with these. That didn't happen. They're buying smart players. And we don't really usually talk about Newcastle being a Europe threat to a top 7 threat, but now they absolutely are. So Harrison, what do you think about the new Newcastle? What's going to happen with them over the next 2 years? What's the future look like?
Well, let's be honest. They're going to be an ever present. All right. I mean, that's just how it's going to be there. As long as they keep hiring the right managers, they have the funds and the means to go about and play the football that they want, and they will. I mean, I really like the buys, the purchases they've had. I mean, Bruno Guimaraes, man, what a guy, what a player. He'll show for the ball at any point on the pitch and can play the killer pass, score the goal. And Alexander Isak, I loved watching him in La Liga. He was excellent. I think that his style of play fits to the Premier League perfectly. And Eddie Howe's finding a way to use everyone. Joel Linton was the first inkling we got that this guy might have something up his sleeve with figuring out just how to use anybody. But when I've seen Miguel Almiron playing in the last month, I'm just impressed. I mean, this is a guy coming from Atlanta United on a major fee. He gets there. I believe it's Steve Bruce, maybe another manager.
Rafa
Benitez. I mean, it's a really tough couple of years there for him, honestly. Just a workhorse running to cover every blade of grass for a team sitting so deep. And now he's an attacking outlet again, and he's dangerous. And it's so great to watch him run at defenders again. And I think Eddie Howe is using that speed and that left foot really well.
Eddie Howe's impressive as a manager in general. What he was able to do at Bournemouth on the budget that Bournemouth had, bring them up to the Premier League, and not just bring them up. We've seen managers bring a team up and then it just doesn't work. He kept them up for years. And other than the injury crisis that they had, they could have stayed up again. They had a major injury crisis when they went down 2 years ago. And Eddie Howe ended up losing his job. And now Bournemouth is back in the Premier League again. But I really like him. He is a manager that he is not polarizing at all. You can get behind him. Gives you kind of like the fan base love, like questioned him when he came in. I remember that, but because like, oh, you bring in Eddie Howe, why don't you go get Mourinho or whatever? You get like a name like that. But Eddie Howe's done a great job, and I'm just so impressed.
Yeah. I mean, he's done a good job. They've brought in players. We have to, of course, acknowledge that this is a state-sponsored team, and I think Jurgen Klopp said it best when there are 3 teams in the world that can do something that every other team pretty much can't. And their transfers have been great. They haven't brought in Mbappe and Neymar, but they don't need to, right? They brought in Bruno. Trippier was a great transfer. Nick Pope, just getting that stability at the back, because who did they have before? Dubravka.
Dubravka.
Yeah, like he was solid, but Nick Pope had been on that Burnley side for so long, and his big thing at like he brought in some of that I think instinct to the back line of Newcastle are one of the best defenses in the league this year, and I think it's a combination of all those things. Botman too has been really good. Fabian Schär has played great, but you look at their bench right now, and they still have some players that you look at and you say, these guys are not going to be on this team for that long. Newcastle are far from done when it comes to transfers. Looking at their bench today, 2 names that immediately stand out are two Liverpool legends right here, Jonjo Shelvey and Loris Karius. I bet not people know.
I didn't even know he was on. I didn't know
he is on Newcastle. Yeah, because his contract ran out at Liverpool, and then I believe with Newcastle's goalkeeper injuries, he was available, so they picked him up. But these are players where they're just going to get filled in, like what we've seen at City, with better and better players that are going to cost more and more, and it's going to lift wages for the entire league by these transfers. And so, Newcastle are going to be a real threat, just as City are a threat now. And I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now, unless something major happens within the rules of the FA or UEFA to prevent, this sort of state-sponsored teams from happening, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about a 100-point season for them in 2031 or something like that.
I mean, yeah, and that's what happens when you are a state-sponsored team and all the money in the world is behind you. It's just weird talking about a Newcastle team that's not under Steve Bruce and doesn't have, the fans aren't chanting for the owners out, every game and this and that. And St. James's Park is not upset. All right, we're going to talk about Chelsea. And I know Harrison is is loving. I know he loves the new head coach of Chelsea, but Graham Potter is now the Chelsea manager. I think we're all upset about that. But they've fired Thomas Tuchel after 2 years, which continues with the Chelsea thing. They have a new owner after the Abramovich sold the team, and now they have a new owner, and things are changing at Chelsea as well. But they did fire their coach. They brought in Graham Potter. They totally changed the whole system. They have a new technical director. They have a new sporting director. They've done everything new, which is kind of expected. But Chelsea won 2-0 against Aston Villa, and there's two different sides of the story. There's Chelsea having the little manager bump to a great manager or a good manager, Graham Potter, and then there's also Steven Gerrard's story. So Harrison, I will let you choose which one you'd like to speak about.
I'll go with Chelsea. I think we should go easy on Gerrard just a little, but I'll start with Chelsea. I like the appointment. Obviously, I love the appointment. I hate that he had to go to Chelsea. I'm sure we all wanted him to do something else, like maybe manage England or Manchester United before Ten Hag was hired. But yeah, I like the hire. I think this is a ride it out season. Easily, like I know it's October, and to say that this early is it's crazy, but it is. It's a ride it out season because they're making what they can with what they've got. They've got Aubameyang at striker that has its limits. And Graham Potter has to become more familiar with these players. He's got really good profiles of players. He's already figuring out the ones he doesn't want, a la Christian Pulisic and Hakeem Ziyech and players like that. I just don't think Kai Havertz and Raheem Sterling, he's got to figure out the best ways to get work from them. Reece James getting hurt is tough. Let's see if he can get the best out of Ben Chilwell as well. That's really important. Center back situation. I mean, they've had a lot of refreshing going on there. He's got a Kepa who's in probably the best form he's been in since we saw him come in.
Oh, the saves he made were insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's taken some time, but that guy, he's come around. He's come around really well. But they've got to refresh that midfield. Conte is done. He's over the hill, and we hate to see it. He's a legend. He's been so amazing to watch in the Premier League, but he's over the hill. Ruben Loftus-Cheek doesn't cut it, and I believe Kovacic is probably their steadiest midfielder on the ball at this point, and that is saying something because they've got Jorginho, and I think Jorginho has become redundant at this point. And yeah, I mean, they just have the middle of the park is such a massive question mark for a manager who needs that solidity in the middle of the park to do what he wants. So this is a ride it out season for Chelsea the rest of the way. Do what you can, fight as hard as you can, but we will not be seeing the full picture of what Chelsea will be for at least 10 months.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. So Chris, I'm going to give you the other side of it. Let's talk about Steven Gerrard and Aston Villa. I know you're Gerrard. Obviously, you love him, the Liverpool legend, but it has not gone to plan at Aston Villa as it was. It has not been a complete disaster, but there is, between him, Brendan Rodgers, Ralph Hasenhüttl, it's sacking season. It's kind of that time of the year. Aston Villa have a good squad. What's your take on Mr. Gerrard?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a tough conversation right now because it seems like they have a lot of solid players in a lot of positions. I mean, Ashley Young is Ashley old at this point, so they could do with a new left back. But Luka Dean, they have him, but he's usually out for half the season too. But you look at some of the players that they have in attack. John McGinn has been solid in the midfield for a long time, but he's just not getting a lot of assists this year. And he brought in Coutinho, and he played really well for the second half of last season, but he didn't even start this game against Chelsea. So that just kind of tells you a little bit right there. But I think a lot of the real debate that we're looking at is what's every player's best position. And it just seems like this is game week 11 and Villa still haven't really found their best shape. Like, they've had a few good games this season, don't get me wrong. If you look at the XG for this one, Villa had 2.45 and Chelsea had 1.24. If you look at some of Villa's best chances, Danny Ings header, Ollie Watkins right in front of the penalty box, Leon Bailey. Like they're all getting into the good positions. They're getting it onto the post. They're not getting it behind Kepa. Kepa's great today. And Villa drew against City earlier this season. Like I was talking earlier about, okay, here's the template how to beat Holland. Go and use it. And Villa were able to shut him down earlier. He did score against them, but I mean, that was just one of his crazy, my leg's going to be 7 feet up in the air and I'm going to be able to tap this by because De Bruyne is just going to put in a wonder cross in. But I think we're still a ways from the sacking conversation at this point. I think, he could bring in 1 or 2 players. He could, I could see him potentially trying to move along Danny Ings and try and get Ollie Watkins back in the middle, because we've usually seen Ollie Watkins' best stuff when he's in the middle or playing at, like a front 2. But I think Bailey's been, he's getting into form as the season goes on. Ramsey is growing into it too. Like they got a few young players on this team, but they're sitting in 16th right now on 9 points. That being said, they're only 4 points from going into the top half of the table. So it's still pretty tight between 11th to 18th right now. So I think it's still pretty early to say, but a lot of the complaints have been, well, what is this Aston Villa team's identity? What is their shape? Do they really have a system? And I think some of those arguments can be drawn over from, when Gerrard was at Rangers, he could just rely on having some of the best players and playing through that league. But now his tactics are really going to be tested at this point, and we're certainly seeing that. But I think we're still far from saying it's time to let him go. If there's anyone we should be talking about, it's got to be Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, because that is a dumpster fire over there.
And I know we're kind of laying, this is our first pod back, so we're laying groundwork as the first pod back. But I want to ask both of you who you guys think is going to be the next manager sacked.
I think it'll probably be Brendan Rodgers, but I mean, Ralph Hasenhüttl has been I just don't think Southampton have a big enough profile for him to get the pressure, but man, they're terrible.
They really are bad. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be Brendan Rodgers. And listen, James Maddison getting that yellow card today does not help him, and it does not help any fantasy owners of him. Thankfully, I don't have him, but that takes him out for game week 12. And a lot of the things that people have been focusing on going into game week 12 is trying to make up for the Arsenal and City blank. And a lot of people saw Maddison as a good replacement for maybe a Foden or maybe a Silva. And now he's going to be out that game week 2. So that certainly doesn't help him going forward. And listen, you look at some of Leicester's games, their next few games, they got Leeds, Wolves, City, Everton. So do they get a win in there? Maybe one.
Absolutely. And so I'm gonna ask you guys 2 questions quick. We're gonna end the pod just in a second. I want to ask you both 2 questions, kind of on the spot, but both of you, who's gonna win the league?
Manchester City.
Yeah, City all day.
Even though Arsenal's absolutely going to challenge, do you think City's just going to kind of do what they do every year and win 15 games in a row?
Yeah. I think it's going to come down to who can bounce back better after the World Cup. And I think City have the depth and the experience for that. Whereas with Arsenal, you don't necessarily have that as much.
The other question, who are the bottom 3? That's the more loaded one. And I know you have no prep for it, but I'm sure there's a few teams that we all kind of think.
Bournemouth, Forest, and Southampton.
Even though Bournemouth's right now, they haven't lost a game, and since they
I think they'll come back down to planet Earth here sooner rather than later.
That's fair. That's fair. Chris?
Yeah. I'm thinking. I'm thinking Forest, Southampton, and Wolves. I think Bournemouth just escaped by the skin of their teeth. But I've not been impressed by Wolves this season.
No, yeah, Wolves. I mean, they've already had a manager change, and they're talking about bringing Nuno in, and we all know what happens to a team when you bring Nuno in.
They
Before
beat
we,
City.
Before we close anything up here, I've got to do the European spotlight. I know we're all into
Oh.
all about the Premier League and everything, but let me tell you what, the Serie A this year is wild. All right, the Serie A this year is absolutely bonkers. And the reason I can suggest this is because the Premier League, we're done playing at about what, 1:00, 1:30 every weekend. These 2:45 slots are wide open for if we're not watching some good NFL game or whatever. I'm telling you, Atalanta is doing so well, spearheaded by none other than Ademola Lookman. Gasparini has once again revived somebody's career who we have not heard of in a long time, the former Everton man. Kavica Kvaratskhelia. Chris, you're familiar with the Napoli winger, I believe?
Yeah, certainly.
He is an absolutely electrifying player that is just unique, so unique. I mean, he is amazing with the 1v1s, and I am growing a spot in my heart for AC Milan. Stefano Pioli is going to fight all year long to retain this title. I don't think they'll have enough, but Rafael Leao and Olivier Giroud have just a beautiful partnership. It's absolutely beautiful. Rafael Leao, to me, is the best athlete in Europe. Just the best athlete in Europe. If he was in America, he would have been a wide receiver 12 years ago. I mean, the guy is absolutely unbelievable. And this league is excellent this year.
I mean, I look at the table. I mean, if you think of Serie A, right, the first two of the top three teams that you think of are Juventus, Inter Milan, and AC Milan. If you wouldn't believe it, but two of those teams are not even in the top six. And that's the part and like Udinese is in fifth. We got Mourinho's Roma in sixth. And then on top of that, it's compact. Like Napoli is 26, but like 24, 23, 21, 21. Like that's what's fun about, the Serie A. This is something that, Juve's dominated. I know Inter won 2 years ago, and AC Milan won last year in this. But, you don't see that in leagues other than maybe La Liga. Maybe.
Yeah, this level of parity it's been lacking across Europe these last several years. I mean, this is an open as a league is going to get, and I'll be completely honest. If Napoli want to run away with this title, I have no problem with that. I would love to see Napoli get a title. I think the scenes would be just amazing to look at. But this league has just been something else, and I'm really glad to see that Gasparini got Atalanta back to what they're about, and doing it with Ademola Lookman is just a beautiful touch.
It's crazy.
I think Serie A really started, with the Dybala unveiling at Roma. Incredible scenes. I still go back and watch that video every once in a while because it's just so impassioned. But we all know David as a huge Mourinho supporter. He even has a mug with Mourinho's face on it because he loves him so much. David, do you think, Roma currently in sixth place right now? They won the inaugural Europa Conference last year.
But I just want to say something. There is no perfect manager to win Europa Conference League the first time ever than Mourinho. Not a perfect manager to win it. Because now he can always say for the rest of his life, and even when his team is in 18th place, he will sit there and say, I was the first manager to win Europa Conference League.
Yeah. Because he's won all three levels of European competition.
And he will make sure you know it too.
He will make sure. He's got a tattoo. He's got a tattoo of it.
Yeah, he's finding another way to become more insufferable. But look, I watch the guy and smile now. Okay, I have let go of everything that happened before. He is just entertainment to me now, and he is plenty of entertainment in a very interesting league.
I mean, and I hope Roma does well. I wish no ill will on him. I hope Roma does well. But I mean, the Serie A is a lot of fun, with the other leagues in the world. The Bundesliga.
On the Bundesliga, yeah. Before we close out, because I know we're probably not gonna, we've been going on for a while, but Union Berlin, right? The club where the fans gave their blood and plasma to fund the construction of a new stand the fans have given their blood for this team, and they're currently in first place in the Bundesliga right now. 4 points ahead of Bayern on the same
it's not
number
even
of
close.
games.
It's 4
Yeah,
points.
they are
Yeah.
they are picking up points while Nagelsmann is just rifling through his closet looking for egregious jackets to wear. I mean, they are looking excellent.
Nagelsmann and Scott Parker are collaborating on their jacket choices.
The top 4 teams in the Bundesliga right now, 3 of them you would never pick to be there. Union Berlin, most people probably have never even heard of before, this season.
They only rejoined the Bundesliga a few years ago, too.
I think Freiburg was in the relegation zone a bit last year, and Hoffenheim has been all over the place. And then, Bayern obviously is in the middle of that. But, you look at it like Eintracht Frankfurt's in 5th, where they probably usually are always going to be. But Dortmund's in 8th and RB Leipzig's in 10th. And, those are the teams you all usually see in the top 4 there. And now you got 3 teams. And I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great. I would love to see Union Berlin win the league. I think that would be so cool. To see Bayern's, after 10 years of winning the Bundesliga in a row, lose it to Union Berlin would be just the coolest thing in the world. And that's why football's great.
I'd need a side camera on the Dortmund board somewhere when that happened, just to see the looks on their faces.
No, absolutely. And I mean, and that's the great part about football, though. That's the reason we love it, is that these situations do come up where giants fall. There will be a time where Manchester City, and it might be this season. I mean, as big of a club as Arsenal is, if Manchester City doesn't win the league this year, that's insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wake up every day praying on their downfall.
I know.
Especially if we gotta mention Pep's had a contract at the end of this year. I think it would be really hard for him to leave at this point, considering
Pep out, or Greg out, Pep in.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
that's a good note to end it on.
Yeah, it is. All right, boys. Well, I enjoyed the crap out of this. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Stoppage Time. We will be back. But thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Later, fellas.